how to deal with really insulting comments that people feel free making to you about your artwork. Fuck them.
Hi, welcome to the Free Art School where we talk about living as an artist, lessons you learn the hard way, both practical and meaningful. Today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Marisa Morán, Jahn, artist, old friend, and very happy to have her here to discuss who is also an educator as well as an artist. So maybe a little extra perspective on more able to articulate some of these things. So thank you, Marisa.
Thank you, Mariah. A pleasure to still be in conversation with you over the past few decades.
Yeah, wild, right? We met as undergraduates at UC Berkeley.
We had a lot of fun, actually. So, okay, if in this conversation about lessons one has learned the hard way or lessons we wished we would have known earlier, I feel like for me, an important life lesson has been trusting my gut about investing in relationships that I know are going to be long-term relationships and really understanding when you've hit a stride and a kind of a creative momentum or there's a synergy between people. Before we started recording, Mariah and I were talking about how when we were in undergrad at UC Berkeley, there was this period of time where, but it was only about 5 years, where there was a number of undergrads who were really motivated and really collaboratively working and learning with each other. And I feel like in my work, which goes across media and scales, and I have a lot of different kinds of people that I collaborate with to make things happen. The key thing for me is when I find a synergy. And that might be a curator who really gets what I do, is really open, but I'm also learning from them. Or it could be somebody who's from a different skill or expertise, and we enjoy working with each other. So I feel like for me, something that has both, I guess like kept me feeling like I'm always discovering and always maximally open, which is why I like to make work, is recognizing those people with whom I have a synergy and running with that.
Are you going with that feeling against someone else telling you maybe a more like logical strategizing that you should be doing? Like, are you pushing back against some other voice?
Um, that's a really good question. I feel like a lot of my career it's not been a traditional path. I'm not someone in a particular discipline where it's structured what you're supposed to do. I think if you're working across media, it's like it's kind of more risk taking because you're like abandoning and you're wending and winding a lot more. And I feel like what guides me is my values and my interest. For me, like my interest is like for me it's not worth making anything unless it makes me laugh and unless it's colorful. Um, and unless I'm learning something.
Yeah.
And it really takes another person it really takes like the right people to get that.
Yeah, because I think a lot of commercial success is built on making work that people understand from previous commercial success or getting commission or a project greenlighted to do on a bigger level or at a place even is always based on something you've done before. So switching, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the variety of media that you work in and how you convince someone to let you do something.
So, okay, I will say one thing that guides the different projects that I do is I'm really interested in working with new immigrant families. And here I'm drawing on my own background as the second generation daughter of a Ecuadorian mother and a Chinese father. We first were living in Texas and then we moved around. And I feel like parts of my extended family, have worked all kinds of odd jobs. I've worked at like a ton of odd jobs, although albeit I had educational privilege. And in the first on my mother's side to graduate from not to graduate from undergrad because that was my brother, but I was the first to go to graduate school. So for me, I lean on those experiences and all the things that were invisibilized that aren't always necessarily talked about and the things that get scrubbed off of people's resumes. And I like to make them visible. So I draw on a lot of personal experiences for myself, for my extended family, and like the kinds of things that I've produced. Well, the other preface I'll say is that a lot of my family feel that museums are not even like not for them, but are even kind of hostile or make them actively feel stupid. So, like, I really love making work that people will encounter in everyday life. So, I've made audio novellas, which is like click and clack on Car Talk, but for nanny. Remember click and clack on Car Talk on NPR?
Yes.
Um, but for nannies. I made a bright orange.
Caretaker nannies.
What?
Caretakers? You mean nannies, like caretakers? Just
Yeah, yeah. Nannies, housekeepers, and caregivers. And that was around when the 2010 Domestic Worker Bill of Rights was first passed in New York State. And they approached me to help get the word out about their newfound rights. And so I wanted to, there was legal information, but the question was how to make it funny and memorable and not intimidating. Because there's some really vital, life-changing information, like time and a half overtime wage, for example, or etc. I've made um, pocket-sized comics for migrant workers from Mexico. I've made a PBS documentary for people who employ caregivers, like myself, because I needed a nanny to go back to work, and um, I wanted to communicate this question that a lot of us have about why is it so difficult to find care if you're somebody who needs care for a, your child or a loved one or your parents, for example. I've made choreographed dances, which was really fun and exhilarating to learn how to do that. There's a lot of Zumba practice involved. I'm working right now on a project in Kosovo, in the capital, which is Pristina, and it's collaborating with three architects. And the that project involves transforming a former brick factory the size of Times Square into an art and technology district. So I'm an artist kind of embedded with that. I've made wallpaper recently. So like I work with different kinds of groups of people. Oftentimes, the art institutions are not my first inner public. My first inner public is like users from a different sphere, and I try and bridge that with the art world. So I think when I was a younger version of myself, had maybe like almost like a caricature understanding of what it means to be an artist. Is like you have your show at the MoMA, and then you have a da 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 da, and then you have a retrospective, and then you put out your monograph. And that's really not how my career has gone at all. It's usually the art world is like catching up to stuff that is in public spaces or like being used by other people. And they're like the secondary or even like tertiary audience. So leaning into those relationships is like what makes the artwork better and makes it more vibrant or colorful or playful or humorous and more impactful. But I do love work making artwork in museums as well, because sometimes it's like where things get really wacky and imaginative.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, there's different benefits and limitations to different venues.
Yeah.
Each one is a different medium, essentially. Well, one of the questions on here that I thought of while you were talking is like, what's the first step? Like, do you remember that point when you're young and you don't know what the
Mm,
first step is? Do you remember being like 21 or 2 and not realize, thinking like, what's the first step?
yeah.
But then, I mean, all the time, every time something is done, it's always like I feel you start kind of starting over all the time. Like the next step is, but I do remember being young and feeling like I was looking at a big smooth rock face that I didn't know how to. Also, because we were in the Bay Area, I think it was harder to like. I feel like you could
Yeah.
set yourself on fire and people just walk by. Whereas in New York City, you could just set up a knitting stand at a bar and someone will write up an article about you in a magazine. That's
That's
how it seemed.
that's funny.
That's how it seemed in the 90s.
Okay, so the first step. I feel like I mentor a bajillion young people about that first step. And I think the most important thing is to always work on your practice because that's the main thing that you bring to the world that you're using to um, see the world through and to navigate the world through, which is both exploring what fascinates you and like what is important to you existentially or where you are in your life. But for me, it's equally important to always be testing and working with different kinds of materials. That's like, okay, how do I, it's like, what are the material affordances of this video camera? Or what can I do with this piece of leather? Or like, what is it? Can I transform into jewelry? Or like, how does this paint work with on the wall? And how do I scale some? So it's like both top down and bottom up. Maybe there's even three directions, right? Top down is like, okay, I'm going to give myself a constraint, or maybe you're invited to do something. The other direction is what you're existentially curious about and want to discover or find out. And the other one is the limitations and opportunities of a particular kind of media. And working on all of these together for me is always the most important thing. And to like keep on, I mean, that's like your most substantive thing. And then I feel like it's really healthy for creative people to both, while they're driving that, to also be open and supportive of other creative people and join on somebody else's team because it's a way to kind of hone your skills and to be sort of not less ego invested, but actually it keeps you really open so that you can keep on growing and you're also growing the field and investing in the field that you want to, the world that you want to build. So for me, when I'm working with architects, um, I'm like involved conceptually and ideationally, but oftentimes in a lot of the phases, it's their driving, and I'm like there in a collaborative but less hands-on intensive way, and I'm still just like learning about that world and that vocabulary and how things in that world work. Or for example, there's a real estate developer who's a partner of mine on one of my projects. And it's like a whole other language that I feel like I'm getting a second business degree in. I think as a young person, when I first graduated, I started a gallery in my living room, which is to say, like you walked into a gallery and you wouldn't have known it, but we built like our bedroom was a 3 foot crawl space in the ceiling. And
Yes, I remember.
yeah, and the second time we had to move, we lived in the closet, and then we lived in the neighbor's pantry. And I was just interested in seeing if I could create a gallery space that was exciting because I felt like there was a lot of gallery spaces that were kind of boring and not so responsive, and I wanted to see what that would like. I felt like myself and my community, we could make something really awesome. And really that was guided by youthful naivete. And I would not, I like, so I started this nonprofit gallery when I was 22 and a half. I still, like, this nonprofit structure is still open, and I wouldn't have done it if I had known better. So I think this is part of it too. It's like seeing how far you can take something.
What do you mean if you had known better, you wouldn't have done it?
Um, if I had known how much work it was going to take, like I was working 80 hours a week for like so many years. And I think there's a many years where I was not working smarter. I was just grinding through because it's like I not only had my role, my like capacity as an artist and my capacity running this gallery and curating, like but shows with my then partner Steve Shada. But I then had like a whole other like set of jobs that were not necessarily the most remunerative. Like I was teaching at the Boys and Girls Club, I was working in a wood shop. I was like sometimes waiting tables. I just like did. I think the one thing that I really would have benefited from is if I had leaned into my teachers and like the mentors that I had around me more and checked in more frequent. I think I didn't know that I could ask them for that kind of guidance. And I knew they liked me and we got along and stuff, but like I didn't know that they were also happy to see me thrive, or they would have wanted me to see, like they wouldn't have wanted me to struggle less.
Yeah, I didn't get that memo either when I was young that you can talk to teachers after you graduate
Yeah.
or ask them for anything outside of the class.
Yeah.
That's maybe a function of going to a big public university, like
It
huge.
is. Yeah. But also I think when I went to grad school at MIT, there was a little bit of that, but and I still it was like took me a long time later to figure out that I could ask those professors. But also in some I felt like on the East Coast, like when we grew up in the Bay Area, the art world was not so professionalized. So like every artist professionally that we know usually had some other kind of like side gig that or side hustle that they did. And people were more likely to talk about it. Whereas you like on the East Coast, there's a lot more, levels of wealth.
Yeah.
And I found people were very closed door about it. So like you couldn't say, "Oh yeah, how much did you make doing this?" or like, "What should I price this at?" People were very more hush-hushed about it. And I felt it was as someone who didn't come from like a family where that was ever talked about, or somebody just getting a leg up in the world or wanting to get a leg up in the world.
Mhm.
I found it really disadvantageous. So, and it was more of like a black box. So, I guess for me, you know, as an educator, I like to open that up a bit and talk about, well, actually, it's really helpful to visibilize not only like for you as a creative person to visibilize, your side hustle and your awesome pottery that you show in Etsy and your like fine art paintings or your whatever. I think that it's like an interesting ecosystem. And I think politically, it's making it possible for other people to, it's leveling the playing field when people are transparent about it. And again, like it's not like transparency for transparency's sake. It's like, because I think this ecosystem of like someone having like switching different modalities is actually really interesting.
Yeah. I feel like there is a shift in recent years of accepting more people working in different modalities and not just the one. And it doesn't devalue your, like, let's say I know a famous art photographer whose gallery didn't want people to know that this person was making a lot of money in editorial and fashion. Like
Oh,
yeah, like a famous person.
yeah. Huh.
Um, like recently, which is
Uh-huh.
because it would devalue, because
I see.
photography
Yeah,
prices are especially vulnerable in the commercial market
I see.
because in the day of the smartphone. So perhaps they were guarding the value of the prints that they were
Mhm.
selling.
Hmm. Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah. By a photographer who was doing well-known editorial photographer.
Did anything happen that it took years to understand or undo the impact of?
Yes. Okay. So I feel like I made a turn in my artwork in the year 2000. Like I went back to grad school because I really wanted to understand how to work in the public sphere
Hmm.
and how to be impactful
This
using
was,
artwork.
can I ask about the timeline? You started Pond, the gallery, when you were 22 and a half, and then at what age did you go to graduate school?
I went to graduate school when I was 28.
28, okay.
29, and I was looking for a program where there was other people who'd been out in the world. And the program that I went to at MIT, which is called Art, Culture, Technology, had a lot of students who fit that profile. And we were maybe technologically curious, but really that department was more focused on critical approaches to making artwork with a heavy emphasis on the public sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And after I finished grad school, I started to learn that, but then I decided I wanted to work with advocacy organizations because I wanted to see like, well, like in the arts, you don't really have a win. I mean, you have like a personal win or professional win. Like, I won this award, or like, I figured this thing out, maybe. But it's not like a clear win, like with an advocacy campaign. It's like, this law was passed, so it's a different kind of win. And I wanted to like see what that was like and see how it worked and see what that. So I had this parallel career where I was like making artwork, and then I was like doing nonprofit, working with advocacy organizations or campaigns, and then directing a journalism organization. And that whole like side turn took about 10 years. And then I feel like at the end, when they finally merged, is when my artwork got better and stronger. But I did feel like when things were here, I was like, I am not sure. I think like on paper compared to other contemporary artists, it looked like I was still at like an emerging phase because I'd had this whole side turn. I feel like it took a number of years for it to register what I was doing professionally. So now I feel like stronger because of it. And I'm glad I learned what I did. And I feel like it made me more resilient, like professionally also, and gave me a lot of skills. But yeah, it took some time to recover from it.
Seems it takes courage to go on a long arc like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, also like I think now it's different, but when I first had my child, um, there was still like there was some of my peers who it was still like stigmatized
Yeah.
to have a kid, 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And you really like felt the impact of it because people like stopped inviting you to things like, oh, we can't invite her for this show overseas or this residency. I'm like, yeah, and people would even like say it, and you're like, are you actually saying that publicly to me?
Yeah, I heard some wild thing, like it was a arts organization. I think that someone they were saying someone said publicly that the person interviewing for a director position was pregnant, so they weren't gonna consider her.
Yeah. So, which like I was like, okay, well, fuck it. I'm going to make artwork about this very issue. Which also, like perhaps does into your question about how do you feel about negative comments?
Oh yeah. I mean, mentally, I just put them in like a little trash bin, and I hear that sound the computer makes, like,
Yeah, and I feel like, it's funny because I read that question, I'm like, you know what? I don't really give a fuck. Or sometimes I'll like I remember with someone in the Bay Area, and I was like 22, said, "Oh, you can't run a gallery and be an artist." And I was like, "Fuck yeah, I can." And so that's also was like always in my head. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do this and see what happens."
I remember that conversation. They were really negging on artist-run galleries. I remember when that happened. You told me.
Yeah.
Because I also was having a shorter run, shorter lived space. It wasn't a nonprofit, but with my best friend, we had a small space around the time Pond was starting to.
Yeah.
So that hit me. That comment also was like, whatever.
Yeah.
No, that person's no fun.
Right. No, that person's is guarding their domain.
I've been working on this question that I don't know if it quite resonates with anybody, but like a personal theory on your own managing your own creativity and how to motivate yourself. Like you
Mm.
were saying with giving yourself some limitations. Like sometimes I'm curious if there's ever an articulable system of between challenges, limitations, fear, hardship, and positive motivators, like
Hmm.
good
Uh-huh.
things that are happening, but either community or giving yourself a treat of some kind or giving yourself a
Oh,
reward at the end.
yeah.
Oh yeah, I used to when I was like broke and making shows, I was always like, you do a good job, you're totally gonna get laid. I don't know who, but I feel it. I feel it coming.
Reward. So like, okay, how do you manage your like energy and motivation?
Yeah. I was curious if you have a theory of how to manage one's own creativity.
Yeah, so I'm really into the book by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi called Flow. He's the guy who in the 90s wrote that book. Now that word has been coined and we use it all the time, but like he's that guy. It's a really useful book because he talks about states of flow and how to induce states of flow. And so I feel like for me, I will be curious about stuff. Like I know there's a certain period in which I'm like, okay, I'm going to produce that thing, whether it's like I'm going to write a book or I'm going to like work on that essay or I'm going to like make these accessories or I'm going to like figure out or like do film editing. And I have to like line up all of the assets beforehand and or like whether that's like stuff I'm gonna read or like film clips that I need to edit or like da 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 and like get my meals together even so that it's like it's all ready for the moment when you have the quote like the state of flow. So it's not exactly spontaneous and then you kind of have to like roll with it. So like for me it's like very much time compartmentalized. It's like metered out and then it's like and then I also feel like there's times when I think it's like Alice Walker has this quote about how creativity or inspiration is like a rainstorm, but you have to like run to the top of the hill and like catch it, otherwise it goes away. So I definitely feel it's like that too. And you have to like, if you don't do it right, for me, if I don't do it right, then it's harder to make it happen. And I like the third thing I'll say about managing creativity is like I had this rule for myself. I mean, now I teach before I was freelancing, but I had this rule of thumb that my artwork gets my best time, which is like 6 to 8 in the morning or like 5 to da da da. And someone has to pay me like a lot of money to get that best time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, your precious time is in early in the morning for creativity.
It used to be at night, but now that I'm a mom, it like it
Yeah.
shifted. Or maybe now that I'm middle-aged.
Mm.
And then I reward myself with exercise.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really motivating because like I got really addicted to surfing this
Oh,
past year and a half.
oh.
So I'm
Where's
like, well, if I'm gonna go to do this, if I'm gonna like take a half of my day to go to New Jersey and go surfing, then I better get this thing done. Like I can't procrastinate. So it keeps me from procrastinating.
yeah.
Or like I said to myself, like, okay, I could either hire a film editor or I could take myself to Costa Rica and go surfing and like edit after I go surfing, and it's the same price. So it's like it's highly motivating for me.
Hmm. Both motivator and reward.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Helpful. Like when do you pull the plug on a project? It was like a project, like a commission I received last year that I pulled the plug on because the curator who brought me in was really awesome, but the commissioning agency were was not they didn't understand artwork. And I don't really like I work with a lot of people who don't understand artwork and I don't like that's fine, I don't care. But they were just didn't understand like my collaborator sense of professionalism. Like no, we didn't want to do something subpar. We didn't want to do something in a different site that had not been chosen. So we pulled the plug because it was just not going to work out. So it's like, and I didn't want to like have bad vibes. Like I didn't want to have be thinking about kvetching and like I didn't want to have to process that information. Like I really only try and work with people that get creativity or have humor. Otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah, and I can be like there are parts of projects that are flexible and certain parts that are non-negotiable.
Yeah.
So I guess getting working with someone who can respect the parts that aren't negotiable
Yeah.
is important. And there's so many good people to work with. I also like there are a lot of people to watch out for in the world, but there's so many great ones.
Yeah.
I thought maybe we could wrap up. We were talking about a little bit about that time that we were in school, but maybe I want to talk a little more specifically about our teacher, who is a art father to many people from
Yeah.
who he was Kevin Radley taught new genres and temporal structures. It was the same class, spring and fall semester, essentially with different names. And he had like this is how we know each other, like from this extended family. And I think even at the end of each semester, he would have like a people would do a series of performances at an off-campus location, and David Rudolph did that. The first time I went to that, I feel like I'm like, oh, I like a lot, this is, oh, I
Hmm.
think I want to do this with my life.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there was a few years of students like, well, I was saying earlier that I had gone back to visit him. I thought it was just this teacher creating every year this sort of environment. And then visiting him a few years later, he said, oh no, it was actually all the students from a, continuous set of years that were creating the community, giving back. And it was like a group dynamic and that it passed, which also broke my heart to know that, oh, it's not like that anymore. And then I had gone to graduate school thinking that school was just like that. Like, oh, you just find this like fertile field. People are collaborating all together
Hmm.
and like sharing. And it wasn't that kind of thing again.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't have a question
Yeah.
other than any reflections you have on that time and that teacher or that whole experience. And I,
Yeah. I mean, I think that so Kevin Radley was really transformative for a lot of people for in our age group. And because he was really embraced wonder and experimentation. And I feel like I try as I mean, like as a teacher, I try and create that. Also, like I remember that there was 8 or 9 of us who collaborated together, and then we made up our own classes and we got like credit for those classes, and we just were collaborating. We worked it was kind of like when you are hearing the Beatles talk about like they knew each other's minds and they just spent so much time like working together. And I feel like, and I have like collaborators in my past where we just spent so much time that it's like becomes really fertile.
Hmm.
And I feel like I developed that instinct in that experience as an undergrad. And so I feel like having the privilege of have of being in that like incubation space of wonder and like knowing how to rely on others and be open to what's going to emerge, really kind of baked that in to have me continue looking for and finding those. Now I know that yes, it is like rare to have that experience as a student or a teacher, and when on either end, when you see it, you really want to nurture it, and like it's a very special, precious thing. And I feel like those relationships over the long term for me are the most where like the artwork just gets like good because you know how to work together and trust each other.
I think that it was a really special experience in a bunch of ways, in that there were a lot of very talented, driven people, but it was not a prestigious department. Like the art department at a
Mhm.
science research school is not
Right.
given a lot of respect. So in some ways, there's freedom in that.
Yeah, I actually had that in my grad school at MIT because I was really in a transitional period where there was like some of the founding directors were transitioning out. And then like in my second year, a new director came in. And the first place where we had our studios, which was like in the wood shop, like kind of on the northern edge of campus in Cambridge, it was kind of like we were left in like this garage with like a ton of time and no oversight, and we just like made stuff and studied stuff together. And no one was like paying attention. And we were right by the wood shops. It was like really productive. The second time we moved somewhere like to these like shinier students, it was less productive because it's like fluorescent lights, but it was like a nicer space with like kind of more quote visibility, but it didn't have that space of make messy experimentation that you could do in the first one. So those are important spaces to seek out for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I appreciate all your time on this.
It's fun to catch up.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say?
How to deal with really insulting comments that people feel free making to you about your artwork. Fuck them. What's something you were surprised to learn? Like, I'm always learning new stuff and like stuff I never would have imagined I would have wanted to know. And that's really fun. From like policy wonky information to how different um like a tool works. Recently I learned that I'm a gearhead.
Yeah.
Like learning about gear.
Mm.
And I like talking about certain kinds of gear. have you had to deal with formal contracts? I love formal contracts. Good fences make good neighbors. Because
Oh
I
yeah.
like will forget when I need to invoice somebody. Um, what have you learned about managing assistants? Um, I hire in twos because if I have just one assistant, it feels like too intimate. But if I have two, they also like will problem solve together, and it's easier for me to manage two or three than one.
Ooh, can I tell you, this is also a lesson I've learned. With one
Yeah.
assistant, I will divulge too much personal information in the
Me
chit chat.
too. Yeah,
Three keeps a professional
agreed.
workplace.
Absolutely, yeah. Practical advice about storing or shipping artwork. It also depends on like your like what resources you have and where you are in your life. So I had a coach one time, like I got this grant one time and it came with like a professional development coach for artists. And I was like, I'm a new mom. This is, 12 years ago. I was a new mom and his advice was like, you know what? Start making films for a while because really you can just share those film links and you don't have to like go and install the work.
Hmm.
So I did that. I did exactly that. And actually that like the films that I did like keep on being shown. So that was great and I learned how to make films. But then I started missing space. And so then I started making like things that occupy space and it's like I love it so much. I'm like, why did I agree to like why did I do this again to myself? Because what am I gonna just like how am I gonna store all this stuff? So find cheap storage spaces to store your stuff cheaply.
Thank you. I really appreciate. Check back in a few years.
Check back in a few years.